Hello and welcome to Threads of Fate. I am your host, Kira Ryberg, and we are joined by the brilliant, the incredible, the wise, the glowing Chloe Margarita to continue our foray into the 36 decans of the zodiac. And today we're going to be talking about the second decan of Cancer. Chloe, welcome back to the show.
So happy to be here. It is currently 6:42 my time, and I've been up since 5 a.m. because I'm just so excited to get back to talking about the decans with my bestie. So, yeah, I don't think there's a better way I could be spending this morning.
I'm so excited. Chloe and I took a little bit of a break because life lifed. We had a ton of episodes recorded and then we just got down. We're pretty much almost to the last one that we recorded, and it's been a while since we've been able to sit down and do this. So we're both really excited to be back at it. I know I've been getting such great feedback from so many of you about how much you're loving the series, and it's so cool to see it received in the way that I hope that everyone receives the Decans, which is that they are so cool and fascinating and endlessly interesting. And yeah, so it just makes me even more excited to like keep coming together with you to do this series. Can't believe we're only on Cancer and can't believe we're already in Cancer, you know?
For each one, I'm just excited. I'm like, oh my God, we get to do this one next. And it doesn't change regardless of the decan. They're all fascinating. So, why wouldn't they be excited for these episodes? I
I
would say.
know. And I think Cancer too, the second decan of Cancer, is a really interesting one as well. Like there's so much that we can dig into. And, we're in the moon sign, we're in Jupiter's exaltation. And then this decan is co-ruled by Mercury and Mars, which is such an interesting pairing. Like I think they're such a funny grouping because I think Mars brings out Mercury's more malefic side, and I'm currently on like a justice for Mercury's maleficence,
Yeah.
moment. Like I feel like it's so easy to be like, oh, Mercury is like both and neither nor, but then we always kind of lend more towards the more positive, side of Mercury. And I just feel like we got to do justice for Mercury's complexity and ability to show up in a malefic way. And that being said, the second does have some of those undertones. And also, when you dig into like some of the, ancient texts and what they say about it, it is so different than what you're expecting from this planetary pairing. So I'm kind of excited to just peel back all of those layers and talk about it with you. But give me your elevator pitch for Cancer 2. How do you introduce this deck into people?
Yes, I've had much time to think about this, and I have used that time to think about this. And the thing that I keep returning to is the fundamental symbol of the crab, which I
Mm,
think is the most prominent in this face of Cancer, because you have this hard shell, right? You have Mars, this warrior defender energy enclosing something, but it's for the softness inside, right? There's hard
mm.
because it's soft. And I think the key to this decan is the cultivation of vulnerability, but knowing that what is precious needs to be protected and defended. And so there's
Yes.
really strong back and forth between, are you on the outside of the enclosure or are you on the inside? And you're going to have very different experiences depending on where you are. And because Cancer is ruled by the moon, you're probably going to be in both at different parts of your life.
Ooh, I love that. I love that orientation towards you can be on the inside or the outside of the wall because I tend to think about it as, and you have placements here, you're on the inside, but it's really fascinating and I feel like correct to think of it as both and because that is Mercury. And also it feels very waxing moon, waning moon in a way, where you have something coming into being and also something that is dying. And with this deck in too, I feel like what you said too about like the cultivation and protection of something sacred is kind of where I go with it. Like I tend to, when I'm introducing a deck into clients or to anybody really, I tend to anchor it in the story of the sign and the decan, kind of like the procession of the decans, right? And I think of Cancer, and this doesn't have to be the only metaphor for Cancer, and there are plenty, but birth is a good one for Cancer.
It
You know,
is.
Doesn't mean that you have to give birth if you have placements here, right? But I think when we think about, like Taurus as like planting seeds and like the agricultural journey, and Gemini is the twins, and then Cancer is birth, there's just kind of like a natural story that emerges. And in the first decan of Cancer, it is the literal birth, right? It is something coming into being, it is the initiation. And then I think of the second decan of Cancer as almost like, okay, you just had this baby, right? And now you have to protect it because it is precious and vulnerable. And it's almost like those first few months of having a newborn where you can't necessarily go many places. Like, you're not really supposed to go into crowds or like enclosed spaces with lots of people because they're just so susceptible to disease and viruses and all of these things. And you want to protect and nurture this tiny infant, right? And you can apply this metaphor to so many different things, but that's what comes to mind for me in the second decan is like, in order for the creation, for the child, for the project, for whatever it is, to reach its fullest, most vibrant form, there has to be this initial phase where you're kind of like, yeah, doing this like ultra protective, almost like helicopter parenting sort of situation over it to ensure that it can reach its ripest moment, which is, I kind of think, what we see in the following decan, which we'll get into next time.
Yeah, yeah, things are here still volatile here, right? You're protecting what is precious, and especially thinking about Cancer one, which is Moon Venus, right? So
Hmm.
sweet, so like nurturing. Yeah, but then Cancer two, you're trying to maintain stasis amongst something that is growing and living. And that is a challenge. And I think there's always going to be this back and forth with Cancer 2 people of when to sort of be more rigid and when to uphold
Hmm.
boundaries and when to like let them down. Because on the other hand, right, if you helicopter parent too much, you hear stories of kids rebelling, right? You can squeeze too
Hmm.
tightly. Or if you don't let anyone in the enclosure, then right, you think of like the way that people are described is like they don't have like enough like entertainment in their enclosure. Like you need something out from out there to
Yeah,
challenge you.
stimulation.
Right? Like
Hmm.
too much safety can make one a dull boy, let's say,
Yeah.
or too little.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like at some point too, you have to go get sick to build your immune system up. You got to go have experiences and kind of get out of the enclosure. But I think that there is something about that very protective nature that is also very scorpionic, right? And this is, we get Mercury's rulership from one tradition, and we get Mars's rulership from the other one that is based on signs. And so this is the Scorpio decan of Cancer. So that kind of overly protective, defensive, and also secretly super vulnerable and sensitive part is part and parcel, I think, to what we find in this decan. It's like, yeah, I'm super hard though. And like ultimately you're just like a total mushball on the inside. And I feel like that's just so true of most Scorpios, although they would cringe and hate to hear that. You guys know I'm right.
Yeah, I think the key with Scorpios, as someone with Scorpio stellium and with this decan, is that you're sensitive. That's why you seem so tough. Like
Hmm.
I speaking personally, like things that shouldn't quote unquote hurt me, like cut me to my core. So I have to like be really boundaried because otherwise it's just like I would just be like a walking like ball of like nerves and tears all the time. Like
Just like a
like
bleeding heart.
yeah, which is like it's fun when you're like with your homies, but when you're just out in the world trying to survive, it's like, okay, there has to be some enclosure, there has to be some discernment. And I think too with Mars, right, we're not just it's not just protection as this like eggshell, which is more lunar, it's protection that is pokey or that will
Yeah.
bite. And so I think it's also on being aware of, can I trust this person? Are they dangerous? Will they take my sensitivity seriously? And if not,
Mm.
then that's probably where the barbs come out.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like this is a bit more of an emotionally volatile decan because we're doing Moon Mars stuff, and then you bring Mercury into that, and there's an ability to have kind of more cutting words or a sharper mind, right? And that being so connected to the way that you're feeling, the way that your body is feeling, right? Not just like your emotions, but also your physicality, right? There's all very connected to what is worth protecting. And I think of, you know, with Cancer in general, I always use this metaphor of like they're like Sims, like when you You have your Sims and you're like playing the game and they have these little bars and you got to keep all the bars in the green, right? It's like otherwise like their hygiene is bad and then they start freaking out and crying or like they're hungry or they need sleep or they need social interaction, right? And like with Cancer, I feel like you're really just trying to maintain homeostasis, right? Like that is like the ultimate journey. And I think here there's a little bit more of like you're trying to maintain homeostasis, but it requires a lot more energy because of Mars's activation here. So there's kind of like a pokiness and think a little bit more of a volatility that I think can show up here when you are trying to be in relationship with things, protect yourself, protect other people. It's like that is kind of like what you were saying about walking around with like a bleeding heart and all of this, right? Like that's a harder, I think it's one of the harder decans of Cancer, even if it is one of the ones that I love the most because of that Mercury Mars influence. I just like I get some of them. Like I think they're really a fun pair, although that might not be how everyone sees that.
Definitely. And I think this is the only Mercury Mars decan.
I think so. Yeah.
And right, the fact of Mars being in fall here is also
Mhm.
going to add some fun texture here where Mars on its own wants to act in a pretty decisive straight line and just pierce right to the point. And in Cancer, there's more of a concern of maintaining relationships. Like what
Yeah.
I really felt with this like Mars and Cancer retrograde we had in the past year was like this desire to just like cut through all the knots, but having to actually untie them and figure out, right, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, perhaps
Yeah.
is a way of describing it, which is not good for the decisive action that Mars is used to. But Mars in this decan and ruling this decan is going to be how do you act while, maintaining ties or protecting what is precious.
Yeah, and I think of Mars as fallen Cancer too, is I always say it's like you've got the warrior going into battle, right? Mars is the god of war. And all of a sudden now Mars is like, oh, but like I'm gonna feel really bad if I kill the other guy. And like I'm kind of hungry, actually. I didn't sleep well last night. It's like there's all these other considerations of like the emotions of the situation and your physical body and your needs and all of those things to be in homeostasis. And it's like, okay, but you're at war though. So it's kill or be killed. So you kind of have to learn how to operate and take all of those things into consideration and know that it's going to make you move at a slower, different kind of pace than Mars is used to. And that's why Mars falls here, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing to be considerate of other people's emotions and to feel bad about harm and danger and all of that, right? That can be like a sensitivity that we need maybe even more of in the world. But does that mean that it feels good for Mars to have to do that? Not really. And I think in this decan, it's like you are so aware of all of those emotional ties, your physical body, all of those things that you're trying to protect and nurture and keep safe, that it can feel like you're doing the crab walk and going like lateral movements rather than doing the straight line thing, like you were saying.
Right. And how the moon defines herself by those shifts, by am I hungry? Like what am I feeling today? And those like aleatory things. And the Mars is like, well, what did I do last? And
Hmm.
so like almost wondering if part of like the satisfaction with people with placements here is being able to act right on behalf of one's feelings or emotions, right? Or defend those like bodily processes or, stick up for sensitivities or whatever, like not needing to always be put together or like being willing to ask for help.
I love that. Yeah. And I wonder if that's something that, Cancer 2 placements have to learn a little bit more. Like if it's not the inbuilt way of approaching things, right? Because Mars usually likes to bear the brunt of the burden himself and doesn't like to ask for help. I think that's just a malefic kind of orientation towards things. It's like, I got this, I can do struggle. And in the second decan of Cancer, I do think it's like the rougher, tougher kind of Cancer, but at the same time, there is that mushy softness underneath that's like, oh, it would be really nice if someone helped me though. But I'd like to appear like I have it all together. I'd like to appear like I don't have all of these different questions and feelings and things that are kind of changing my decision making process, right? And I think of that Mercury component being brought into this, right? Where it's like, how do you do rational, logical thinking when emotions are involved? It's a lot harder, you know?
Yeah, I feel like the mercurial side of it is something that is not really discussed. It's I really would like us to figure that one out because right, like does this, we'll look at the examples, like does it make someone who is able to right really poignantly convey an emotional point, right? I would say probably yes. Like I think of
Hmm.
Kurt Cobain has his moon here,
Yeah.
right? Kendrick Lamar has his Mercury Mars. I'm waiting for when we're going to talk about that because that's probably going to take like 10 minutes. Like Franz Kafka has his sun in Jupiter here, and who he is such a freak. Like he is so like in the 12th too. And
Yeah.
like I think too of this Decan being able to like create like weird artists because they're so in their own world that like what they create is just like so different than the rest of the world. Like, I mean, I can get into so much of Kafka, but I'll just say, right, we know he's like writes about a dude turning into a bug, right? There's a lot of heavy, very like burdensome themes, but apparently he thought his stories were hilarious. Like he couldn't finish reading them out loud because he couldn't stop laughing. And yet at the same time, he told his friend when he died to burn all of his stories. So the only reason we have any of his stories is because his friend like went against his dying wishes.
Oh my God. I love like the concept of wanting my stories to be burned is so Mercury Mars. You know what I mean? Like that's you couldn't get more literal if you tried. And I do think like what you're saying, there's an ability to like make a point, right? Like make a sharp point, like talk about painful subjects, talk about things that are emotionally volatile, right? Like you're bringing this mercurial component into things where we're thinking about it, we're discussing it, we're disseminating our ideas about it into the world, right? And there is that like Stevie Nicks has her Venus here too, right? And so much of what she's writing about in like her kind of own weird way is like her experiences with some of the not so easy parts of life and relationships, right? Like Fleetwood Mac was a mess of relational discomfort a lot of the times, right? Like they all dated each other, they're all fucking each other like at different points in times. And like that kind of messiness of relationships, right, is a big part of what she made art about. And I think that there is a true ability to tap into what is, yeah, maybe emotionally volatile and then to either convey that in the mercurial fashion or to fight for it in the martial fashion. But you get both.
Oh, were you going more?
Nope.
Oh, great.
Just
Okay.
delaying. Just a
Okay.
mercurial delay.
Okay, perfect. Well, what you're saying makes me think of two things. One with Stevie Nicks, there's this kind of famous anecdote from I think about 10 years ago where she's describing she has this pool at the back of her house that only women are allowed. She says if there's any men at her house, they are sent to the front of the house. Like you don't get to see like Stevie Nicks in a bathing suit unless you want to. So like that theme of enclosure is so big, and I think that's how Cancer 2 people find their peace is staking out places inside the big bad world that feels safe and nurturing and like they can let their guard down. But then
Totally.
you were saying about Cancer 2 making like a sharp point, and I think of my favorite Franz Kafka story is called In the Penal Colony, which is literally
Mhm.
about this dude creating this like torture device where he like has this like needle like carve like onto like a prisoner's back like their crime over and over until they can perceive it in their mind.
Wow.
It is a crazy story. But just like that sharpness of words, I feel like, something that literally like penetrates you is, yeah, like a thing you're going to find over and over with Cancer 2 natives. Like they're here to say something with like an emotional and probably like martial impact.
Yeah, and like to get to the bottom of certain situations too, like even just to kind of make themselves feel better, develop acceptance around certain themes. Like I'm thinking about Amanda Knox, who has her son here, and was falsely accused of killing her roommate, right? So we have this very like martial theme that kind of defined her life. But then there was also the legality and the trials, and then the mistrial and the retrials, and all of these different things that feel very almost mercurial about it, like this back and forth sort of situation. But what was really interesting to me about her story beyond all of that, we've talked about her in the past on the podcast, is I recently watched the show that she did on her life on Hulu, and it's so good. But a big part of it is how she goes back to Italy, like to Perugia, to find her prosecutor and like have a conversation with him, and they like develop a relationship and have all of these like letters sent in between them because she basically wants him to admit that he got it wrong, and like she like can't let this go and like has to get to the bottom of it and do that kind of like penetrating thing where like that I feel like is so Mercury Mars, where it's like no, but you need to admit this so I can feel at peace. Like I can't move on until like I finally get like the one guy who ruined my life basically and saw me as something that I wasn't and put that into the minds and hearts of so many people around the world. And there's almost like there's such an emotionality attached to this, but there's also this feeling of like this Mercury Mars like pursuit of it all, right? Like the mind won't rest. She really just wants him to admit it, and he does and doesn't. I don't know how true to story the show was, but it was executive produced by her, so I think pretty true to story. And it seemed like he kind of like acknowledged it without outright saying, he was basically like, yeah, today I probably wouldn't prosecute her knowing what I know now about who she is as a person. And I feel like there's kind of that like, you're not gonna best me sort of like Mercury Mars thing, like I'm gonna one up you. Like I'm gonna get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and I mean, it does seem, yeah, Mercury Mars too, to be like, you're right, you have to believe my version of the story, or like, can you help validate this through acknowledging that? And
Hmm.
I wonder if that's something, yeah, that Cancer two people probably struggle with a lot is like, is it worth it to spend all your time convincing everyone that they're wrong about you? And versus like letting them misunderstand you and trusting the ones who get you immediately. Right. Because
Yeah.
that, yeah, Mercury, Moon, Mars thing just feels very like how I am perceived, like how people process me is like going to come into conflict with like how I actually see myself, especially if you kind of get into the Cancer stereotype of they're not going to reveal everything about themselves initially.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit more sensitive in general. But I think while there is a lot of pokiness and discomfort that lives here, there's also like the image descriptions that we have of this Decan are so different, like than that, are so funny and playful. And, like Agrippa says, it's a man clothed in comely apparel or a man and woman sitting at the table and playing, and it bestoweth riches, mirth, gladness, and the love of women. And if you read some of the other ones, it's all about music and like musicality and joking. And I feel like I think Austin Coppock, he calls this the walled garden, and he talks about how like it's kind of like the nature, like the inside joke, right? Like when you're behind closed doors, right, you can open up, like that sensitivity is out. You're a little bit more likely to like maybe make the cutting remark and like not be so scared that it's gonna come back and get you a little bit. And I think that there is that to this Decan in particular, that it's like the kind of fun and playfulness of Mercury and the little bit of the audacity of Mars can come out when you're in enclosed spaces or when you're not necessarily as on display as we see in some other decans.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really brought this all together for me was doing my etymology research for fun and
My queen.
seeing that the word paradise, like, it comes from the root of enclosure. Like, to create an oasis, there have to be walls, which has a lot of implications, let's say. But I think
Yeah.
it's to say, like, to create this sort of paradisical, that's not a word, space, like in the Three of Cups, right? The card associated with this, you see these three women surrounded by pumpkins and they're all rejoicing. Like that sort of thing, like often is interfered with if it happens out in the world, right? There has to be kind of that space to let your guard down. And yeah, I think Austin also calls this like the drunk talk decan. It's like this is where like you're dishing and you're spilling in that way that like, alcohol or drugs can assist with. So, I'm not necessarily going to be in an altered state just anywhere. So I think this is a big thing about like who you are and what part of your life comes out really depends on, yeah, how much protection it has.
I love that. Yeah. And I think about, like I have this deck and I was trying to find the image online and I can't. And I think it'll probably take me way too long to just find it while it's sitting in front of me. But the Three of Cups in this deck is one where there are like the three women and they're cheersing, like we normally see in the standard Three of Cups imagery. But around them are all of these figures that are kind of like doled out or like in black. And it kind of creates this othering. that's happening. And I think about that a lot with this Decan. I found it. If you're watching the video version, you can kind
Oh,
of see.
wow.
But it's like it's three
Yeah.
women all in color, and then there's kind of these figures in the back that are not like you can't see their faces and stuff. And it kind of creates to me this feeling of both in crowd and out crowd, right?
Yeah.
And like what will tell your best friends and then like what other people see, but also, and I think about I wrote about this in like my Decan's guidebook, is that there's that feeling of like being at a bar and you're like sitting alone, you're like reading your book, having your drink, and then you have like three friends in the corner who are laughing it up and they cheers, and you just kind of like feel like, oh, I'm not in that moment. I'm not included. There's like this feeling of also having all these people that come together and have this really beautiful moment. There's also going to be other people who are not included in that. And that I do think that there's certain kind of yeah, like emotional things that can come up with that feeling of like rejection, which I think the malefics both once again have their hands in rejection. And I think that this one is kind of like, oh, the rejection of the group or the fun moment or like yeah, like the kind of like everyone getting a drink or whatever it might be, the joke, right? Like being at a table and everyone's like, you remember that time? And like there's that person who wasn't there and they're like, no, I don't remember that time. And you retelling the story doesn't make me feel better about the fact that I wasn't invited when there was that time. There can be some of that that comes with this Decan too. And I think it kind of ties back into what you said at the very beginning, that sometimes you're going to find yourself on the inside and sometimes you're going to find yourself on the outside and you're going to experience both. And I think one of the key themes of this Decan is learning how to do both and still be gracious and sensitive to the way that other people are feeling, not just the way that you are feeling. Because I think sometimes in Cancer, there can also be, whilst a great sensitivity to other people, also a focus on if you're not good, it is very hard to then be good for everybody else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think ultimately that external exclusion is here to teach Cancer to people that you are allowed to do that too. And
Hmm.
it is, you need to trust your intuition around, I can trust these people, or I'm going to let these people in and not that, and not see it as, I think when it's twisted, it can become vindictive or it can
Yep.
become purposefully exclusive. But when it's coming from a place of living in reality, then it can be just a matter of fact of, I know you that way and I don't know you that way. And
Hmm.
I mean, I think, it just makes me think a lot about like my own like party planning and like the back and forth. Like I was just sharing between like, do I only invite people I know or do I open it up? And like that's
Hmm.
very different vibes, and as a Leo rising, I love that like unknown, like public element. But then it's like, yeah, but I also like hanging out with my friends. And what if some weirdo shows up?
Yeah.
Cancer,
Yeah.
like I don't want any weirdos showing up. Or like if I'm
Yeah.
gonna, like if I'm gonna like, go, yeah, be in an altered state, you want to be around people you can trust.
Totally. Totally. You want to be able to do like the Agrippa thing, right? Where you're just like playing and you're like mirthful and glad and happy and you're not worried about what might happen if like the other shoe drops or this person betrays me. And I do think that there can be an element of that betrayal that shows up sometimes in this Decan, right? Where it's like you were on the inside and then now something happens and we're on the outside. And I can't help but think of my queen, my icon, Monica Lewinsky, who has her midheaven in this Decan.
You're gonna do
Because
one thing. You're gonna talk about Monica
if I'm gonna
Lewinsky.
do one thing, it's gonna be bringing up Monica Lewinsky's chart whenever I possibly can. But like she was on the inside for a really long time, right? Like on the inside of the White House, like in cahoots with the most powerful man, right? And they had this secret, and it was very walled garden, right? Where like only a couple people knew. And then what happened was like the person on the inside betrayed her, which there are many ways that this shows up in the chart. But I think that kind of internal like inclusion of the walled garden that then developed into being on the outside of that, right? And then being vindicated for being on the inside also came at a high cost to her. And like she has her midheaven here, right? Like it's a big part of her legacy, her reputation, the things that she does in the public eye, how other people see her and receive her. And so I do feel like there is that kind of both and with Mercury of like you're going to be on the inside and you're also going to be on the outside. And sometimes that's going to come about through martial means of betrayal, which is not always easy. And I think it can hurt the Cancer two person a little bit more because I feel like there is that Scorpio quality here. And Scorpios don't hand out their trust very readily. And so when they do and it's betrayed, I think it hurts, it cuts a little bit deeper because they're like, ah, you got past my like sensors. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, it even makes me think of like one way I've heard fallen placements be described as more resentful than detriment placements, because detriment only knows being on the outside, but that fallen places is literally fallen from grace. Like they know what it's like to be embraced or to be elevated. And now they have to deal with the bitter opposite of that.
Never heard that one before. I'm like, okay, ouch. But I can see it. I can see it too because a lot of, fallen placements also have triplicity dignity, right? Where there's this sense of being like with friends and like I think Benatti says it's literally like being around like people who feel like kin, so I can see it feeling like, oh yeah, like I'm on the inside, I'm in my element, I'm with my friends, and also that I've been rejected or fallen from grace in that sense. So that's a really interesting, I'd love to know who came up with that take.
I think it was Austin Kovic, of course.
Usually, yeah, it's just uh,
But it
so
makes me
good.
think too, like if this was a Jupiter decan, there might be a more of a sense of understanding or meaning as like to why you're kicked out. But when it's Mercury Mars, like speaking to the maleficence of Mercury, like you were saying before, it's much less, it's more utilitarian. It's more like
Hmm.
that's just how the pieces fell, or like someone had to take the fall. So it just happened to be you. Like there's not, there might be this desire to put meaning on it or to be like, what does this say about me? But it
Yeah,
just might be like, the way the numbers worked out, like you're the one who's getting fired or something. So it's like
yeah.
the moon, it's like you have to be like balance, your feelings with the kind of just like matter of factness of like the way like power and things turn out.
Yeah, and I think it's not easy to do, right? Like we're still in Jupiter's exaltation, so I think that desire to understand even like why did the chips fall this way? Why did the numbers like crunch out to be this way? Why am I the one who's getting, the short end of the stick? I think can still be part of it, but at the same time, that's still the way that the numbers crunch. That's still the way that the chips fell. And developing some acceptance for that, I think, is probably one of the harder parts, of this decan. But I feel like there's a lot of ways in which it's like it's just not all bad. Like we see it in the image descriptions. We also see it in the tarot card that is associated with this decan, right? Like you get that Three of Cups, like we were talking about, where it's like it's people coming together. And yes, that can have an exclusionary force to it, but it's also a moment of joy. Like you draw the Three of Cups, you feel happy. I'm like, oh, great. Like I'm going to hang out with friends or I'm going to have a nice moment, right? There's an ability to also, I think, savor what is good and what is fun and what is delightful. In addition to also having that kind of sensitive and protective and maybe a little bit like distrustful side of things. And I think it's trying to find the balance between the two and realizing that because this is the moon sign, there's always going to be an ebb and flow. There's always going to be an acceptance that like one day you're up and the next day you might be a little bit down and you might feel a way about it and get in your head about it because that's kind of Mercury's MO a lot of the time, but that doesn't mean you're, yeah, like doing anything wrong, you know?
Yeah, and I think controversially, exclusion can be good. I think of like the paradox of, and then Odette's fighting me as I said this, like the paradox of intolerance is something I think a lot about now that like Nazis are being mainstreamed again. It's like, yeah, some people don't deserve to be in regular society. Some people don't deserve
Facts.
my time because they have not shown that they can honor it. And
Yep.
it makes me think too of like Kurt Cobain, who really struggled with Nirvana's fame. And he even said in like the liner notes of one of his albums, like, if you're racist, if you're sexist, you're a homophobe, like, I
Yep.
don't think you don't listen to my music. And he really struggled with like the, kind of 80s jock dudes that he hated growing up, like being fans of his. And he's like, no, these are like, I'm here for the outcasts. I'm here for the
Yeah.
people who are lost by this world. And that way it's like, this decan can like collect people who, yeah, society, maybe doesn't help them feel safe all the time.
Yeah. And I think that that's even like you said, like exclusion can be good sometimes. And we see that so forcefully through that Kurt Cobain example where he's like, I'm actually going to exclude all of you people who just aren't worthy of my music who aren't worthy of my time because you're shit people, right? And with shit beliefs and whatever you're doing is just like not something I stand by. And I feel like because of that exclusionary thing, it makes me think of the phrase like gatekeeping is good, actually, and like sometimes you gotta protect what's sacred and sometimes you've got to and what's sacred is life and connection and relationships, and I think people with placements here know that, and it makes me think of the Kendrick Lamar example, who was pretty nice all the way around until Drake like took shots at his family. And then he was like, "Oh, you're going to come after like what is so sacred to me." Then actually like bet like and destroyed him as a result.
And I mean, it's just, I mean, as a fan of what do I want to say, discerning haters, I just Kendrick just exceeds my expectations every time. Where it's like, there's so many reasons he won the rap battle, but I think part of it was like what you're saying, like this being fueled by sheer spite of like, not only did you come after my family, but everything about you is offensive to me, like as a person and my principles. Like the whole "not like us" is basically saying like, right,
Like
I know the
exclusionary.
culture. Yeah, I'm part of the culture and you're not, because you're not following yourself. You're not being truthful, right? Don't tell any lies about me and I won't tell any truths about you, because it's like, and he's able to like so artfully penetrate like all of the like deepest flaws of Drake. Like part of the reason like Drake lost so poorly was he never actually said anything that cutting or true about Kendrick. Like it was all just like surface level and not true. And Kendrick like made a study of like each
Hmm.
and every one of Drake's shortcomings and said it right in that Mercury Mars like the most funny and like artful way possible.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I'm thinking too about how it's just like not like us is once again like bringing that exclusionary principle. And I'm also thinking about how Drake has his moon here, but in the 12th.
And he's all about like, he's that line about like, how many more features do you feel black enough, which is like, a conversation that I have no place in, but like is a huge thing in hip hop. Like what is your cred? Like what is like the role of race, and like him, like the way that Drake acts towards his race, he kind of like takes it on and off, and Kendrick's like, I can't do that.
Yep.
Right. So now what?
Yeah, totally. And I think too with like Drake, right, is like once again like was on the in crowd for a very long time, right? And is now doing the both and thing of like being on the outside a little bit. And because of that kind of rejection of almost like sincerity. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he kind of stopped being sincere in his craft. And I think that was kind of the impetus for a lot of the problems that found him. And then we see that kind of come to a head with this Kendrick, rap battle, which was so funny because it took place like during the Mars retrograde in Cancer and
Uh,
everything. Like, there was like so many things that were happening or the Mars retrograde in Cancer was when he went to the Super Bowl, right? And he performed it and it just like took things to the next level, right? Was that what like the timeline of things? I
yes.
remember,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
yeah. And there was this fear of like, oh, is there going to be some backlash with Kendrick, like when that retrograde happens? But that was not the case at all.
yeah, for sure. And so I think that there's just kind of like this need to also be sincere, even in the face of difficulty, even in the face of opposition, right? And realizing that like you can't change like how you feel. You have to honor that and stand by that. And as long as you're doing that, like it's going to be a little bit easier to get by than if you're kind of rejecting your emotions and rejecting what you think and what you feel about things, even if it's difficult, because at the end of the day, like the underbelly of the scorpion sometimes is like looking at what's hard and ugly. And I think that this part of Cancer is good at looking at what's ugly, you know?
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's why Kendrick can so effectively cast stones, is because he turns that gaze at himself again and again throughout his art. Like so much of it is about like the way he's broken his oaths or fallen short on his faith. So it's
Hmm.
almost that thing of like, what could Drake say? Because Kendrick's already said it about himself, right? If you say it, if you admit it, then people can't really hurt you with it. So I think that's like another key if you have placements here, which is like sometimes your vulnerability is your strength and you need
Yeah.
to draw on that, or else you're going to spend your whole life being afraid of people like seeing your vulnerabilities and being ruled by that.
Yeah. And realizing that it's not a bad thing to be vulnerable. Like I'm thinking about Khloe Kardashian, who has her Venus Mercury here, right? And like so much of the public discourse around her, besides her relationship with her family, is her relationships to different men and the ways that they treat her, right? And her kind of willingness to stand by them in moments of difficulty, whether it be literally getting cheated on multiple times by Tristan Thompson or Lamar Odom's drug addiction, right? There was like all of these things, but also like she, as a result of having so much public vitriol cast against her because of her kind of like, I'm going to stand by my man sort of thing, it also like caused her to go into hiding, right? Where she was like, I don't want to be seen as like this person who's like, like I am really sensitive and I am really vulnerable. And also I don't want to be seen as in that light in a negative way, or and have you guys kind of weaponize my sensitivity and my emotions and my relationships and cast stones, And so she kind of did the thing where she like pieced out a lot, like doesn't really give interviews very often, like stay, like says that there's like give her a lot of anxiety and she just likes to stay in her house. Like she says, like she just literally stays home now. And I think about that a lot with like how she used to be when she was maybe on the inside of things versus being on the outside of things, right? When she was younger and like partying and like was very different than the way she is now. And I think a lot of that had to do with her in crowd, out crowd experience.
Oh, totally. I'm just having insight. First thing I'll say is I saw a headline a few days ago that she's been like celibate for 3 years, which like we don't need to know that, but we do. So furthering that, but you thinking about the inside makes me think a thing that's plagued Chloe for years, besides like stuff with like body image and like that's a whole other thing, just like how her body has like become this like emblem of like this not just thin but like new sculpted aesthetic where she's like tiny but has like all these like crazy
Muscles.
muscles that can only come from like extreme exercise and probably some help. But the thing that really plagued her was people questioning her paternity, being like, "Is
Yeah.
Oprah your dad? Is this random makeup artist your dad? You're not like us, right? You're not like the others." And it makes me think of the
Oh,
baby associated with this, Hercules, who, because she was, he was born of Zeus but not of Hera, like he suffered a ton because of that, because of his origins.
yeah. Can you give us a little bit more on the origin story of Hercules and kind of his relationship as you see it to this Decan?
Yes, of course. So I think Hercules is often seen as this great warrior, right? Completed the 12 labors, son of Zeus, semi-divine. But I know him from my work with Ras Al Gethi, which is one of the primary stars in the Hercules constellation. And the name for that is not the warrior, but the kneeler. Like
Mm.
that star is much more about devotion, following some sort of natural order. Like I actually see like a lot of like scientists and like biologists, who have placements with this star, but like it's more like devotion to like the divine or like a
Mm.
system bigger than you. And so you see that with Hercules, where the whole reason mythically that he performs these 12 labors is Hera is so jealous of this bastard child of her husband that she possesses him to, depending on the story, like kill his children or kill his whole family.
Yeah.
And so he then has to, in penance, perform these 12 labors. And then actually, the story goes that he doesn't actually fully win Hera over until she mimes giving birth to him, like him like emerging from her skirts. And then she like takes him in as a child. But he has to go through this whole ordeal that is not even his fault, right? Which is another theme. It's like, but he still has to do it. And
Hmm.
so it's like the warrior side, right, is very much related to the devotional side, is very much related to like the mommy issue side.
Oh my God, you know that like the going through a huge ordeal and it not being your fault like makes me think of Chloe though, like so profoundly. Because right, like all of the things that she's gone through in her relationships, like you can't make a man be faithful to you. And like the fact that he was cheating on her while she was pregnant and like about to go into labor, trash. À la poubelle, as we say in
It
French,
was all on
to the
TV.
trash can. Hmm.
Like there was no enclosure. Like we
Yeah.
saw it, like a few months after it happened.
And also with like her sister's, like younger sister's best friend, like
Oh,
kissing
that's
Jordan
that was the
Woods.
other one. I'm thinking
Oh,
of the new one.
no, the same guy,
Right, you're thinking of, oh right, Jordan Woods. You're thinking
Tristan.
of Jordan Woods. I'm thinking of the second time when they just did IVF
Right.
And his other baby mama came out. See, there's too many to keep
There's
track
too many
of ways
cheating
of
scandals to
losing.
even keep track of. And also then her first husband, Lamar Odom, falling victim to addiction and like, really her bearing the brunt of that and trying to be there for him and understanding of the fact that he was also cheating on her and all of these things too, but like as a product of the fact that he was addicted, and there was so many ways in which she can't control either of those situations, and yeah, like had to bear the labor of difficulty of all of these other people's shit, really. And I think that that can be a theme that we see with this Decan is sometimes like the labors and the difficulty and the trials and the tribulations that placements here go through are not always coming from themselves, but are coming from the environment that they find themselves in. And while the moon is our internal world and our bodies, it is also just where you find yourself. I think that was one of the things that like Austin Coppock gives the moon that really helped shift my understanding of her. It's just like, where are you? Right? Like the moon being like that presence, right? That present moment, that present location. And thinking about that too is like, well, sometimes you just find yourself surrounded by other people. Sometimes you find yourself in relationships with other people, and you are then all of a sudden going to have to respond to what they bring to the table. And you can't always control that. And I think that's very hard for the Mars part of this decan that wants control, right? And wants to be able to have things go a certain way, the way that feels good, the way that does bring about that kind of mental stability, and the way that does bring about like the maybe softer sides of this decan, like happiness and joy and all of that. But at the same time, it's like you automatically lose agency in a way when you're in relationship with other people because you just can't control them.
And I think it speaks to then like the heightened importance of Cancer to people being discerning about the people that they're around and
Yeah.
who they because they're so impacted by it. And it makes me think too of like that also probably requires in a very like cliched Cancer way, like looking at like how your primary relationship, like with your parental figures or your mom, like impacted like how you think you're supposed to function in relationship. Like I can't help but think of like for Chris, the Kardashian mom is closest with Chloe, and like they live like next door to each other and
Yeah.
hang out all the time. And like I like the thing that would piss me off watching the Kardashians when it wasn't as boring was when like Chris would be like, "Oh, I just talked to Tristan, your ex, or like, you should bring him around, or like still be friends with him." And it's like, do you really just want them to get back together so you can all just like all your daughters can only have one baby daddy? Like for like that just see like it was so odious to my spirit because it's like what about Chloe's healing, like what about like showing that you care more about her than like her being in a relationship. So it's
So
like
odious to my spirit is like one of the best things you've ever said.
it's just like I'm like that's not like that's I was like that's not how a mom's supposed to act. Like your mom's supposed to be your number one. And so like I think that's yeah something to consider, like for better or for worse, is just like yeah, what does your mom help with your like boundaries and like protecting what is precious, or does she like expose you to the elements? Because
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems chiller than like being the child who's like holed up by themselves. But like you kind of have to be because like you deserve like those pristine, nourishing vibes that can only come with discernment. Like in some ways, this really mirrors like my Scorpio Mercury placement,
Yeah.
to be
Oh, totally. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally see that too. I feel like, as someone who's married to a Scorpio Mercury, I love that placement.
honest.
But there is kind of like you have to be in close quarters to like really get the depth of it, Like, like I think my husband is like the funniest person in the world, but like not everybody gets that side, And I think same thing with Cancer 2 placements, like the true like humor is probably a little bit more cutting and maybe a little bit insensitive at times, but like it's only going to come out when there's trust there. And I think a lot of that is always going to stem from how you navigated interpersonal relationships as like a child, right? Like and like your relationship with your mom and like all of those different things are going to impact the ways that you then go forth to relate in the world and like what you think is, like I always think we kind of develop either our family's sense of humor or we develop our sense of humor in opposition to our family. It's like one of the two.
Definitely. Yeah. And just like there's something there too about like a big way that I show that like I'm like fuck with someone or that I feel safe with them is I rib them. Like I make fun
Totally.
or or it's,
Totally.
I let them make fun of me. Or I think of like once this like person like made fun of my driving, but I was like offended because I'm like, you don't know me that like that. Like you don't get to like joke about this because you haven't said anything nice to me yet. So no, versus like I love it when people who I love call me out because it's like from a place of knowing me and a place of love. And also like, yeah, in that Mercury and Mars way, sometimes we do need our shit called out. Like that's what like closeness is about too, is like, hey, you're not like maybe like holding the space as well, or there's like yeah something you're forgetting. So I think it's yeah being able to be around people who you can have fun with but also whose opinion you actually value.
Yeah, I love that. Like it's people, I feel like it means like you're not surrounding yourself with yes men is kind of like part of the way to do it too, right? It's like people who are going to keep you in check, people who are going to be honest with you, even if it does potentially hurt your feelings, because you can also come around to being like, oh no, like we know each other well enough to stand up for each other and to protect each other. And we can rib and we can joke and we can have fun and it can be both and, it doesn't have to be like either or. And I feel like, yeah, you're really good at holding space for both in your relationships with other people and also like holding them accountable too, which I really admire about you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking at the examples at someone who's like the complete opposite, which is Elon Musk, who's not funny. That's like he's like I think that's like the trait that I hope he's remembered for the most. I mean, besides the fact that he's evil and he caused the death of like millions of people. But that's the thing, like he did it all because of like bureaucracy and greed, and then like a
Totally.
desire to be liked. But he does like that's his definition of surrounding oneself by yes men.
But I think like he also so badly wants to be on the in crowd, like so
Like
badly wants to be on the in crowd that he like casts himself on the out crowd. Like I think about how he does like sometimes those like live streams where he's like, no, like I'm such a good gamer, and then he like can't game or whatever. Like there's just like these ways in which he projects to be like really good at something or really adept at something because he wants to be seen as cool or likable by the people who do that thing and then just falls so flat. And it's like, dude, if you were just like once again, like true to yourself and sincere and you stopped like playing a game of like what is going to make me the coolest or the most liked, maybe it would go better for you. I really feel his Sirius ascendant, honestly, or Sirius Mercury ascendant situation. Like I feel like the desire for greatness and ambition has just like burned this man to a crisp.
yeah, where it's like how I mean the thing that really encapsulates it for me is like we don't know how many like baby mamas he has. We don't know
Mm,
how many children he has, but we are fairly sure that he's not actually having sex with them. So it's like, how are you turning this thing into the lamest thing possible where you're like in vitro fertilization? Like where you just have a fertility clinic at this point. Like
they're
this is not swaggy by anyone's definition. But
screaming.
now I have to know about it.
So I
And
didn't
it's
realize that
yeah,
about
yeah.
him. I mean, it's not surprising, I guess, given like obviously who would want to,
No,
but yeah.
like we know about some, but like there were many articles being like it could be dozens more.
Oh
Like
my God.
yeah. Okay, maybe
Well, there's gonna be some people who wear this Decan better than others, and we can only hope that we know more of the Cancer 2 people who wear it a little bit better than Elon. I think one of my favorite, like funny, completely unrelated people who have placements in this Decan, you're a Survivor person, right? You watch Survivor? We both like love, yeah, reality TV, obviously, but also competition reality TV was like where I first got my love of reality TV. So I've been watching Survivor since I was a kid. And like I think it's so funny because so many of the deck and image descriptions for this like talk about like games and having like a love of game and like a face, it's like the face of playing, and none other than Boston Rob, who if you are a Survivor fan, you know who
also
Boston Rob
portrayers.
is. Yeah, it has his ascendant and lot of victory in this Decan. And I think of it so funny because it's like, of course, you're known for like almost like fake competition, right? Which is like, it's like the game, but there is also like, it's Survivor, but it's like to win $1 million. And he's been on, I think, more times than any other player. He's been on like 4 different times. They like erected a statue in his honor in one of the seasons of his head. Like,
I
like
love
he's
like
won more times than anybody else, right? So like there is this kind of like playfulness, but also like play fighting, play survival, where it doesn't always have to be like life or death. And like sometimes it is, right? Like we see with Amanda Knox and like certain situations like that where it is truly like it is violent. And then, or not even because she didn't do it, but like her life was marked by this violent act, right? But then sometimes it's just like Boston Rob stuff where it's like, yeah, and you win games because it's a lot of victory and you're known for that. And it's like how you play. And Survivor is so much about like your alliances, right? Like the in crowd out crowd
yeah,
thing.
and like the first time I watched Survivor, like I came to it later, I was like, oh, this is the perfect reality show
It
because
is.
no one's life is actually getting messed up. It is so like it is strategy on so many different levels, and it is not right. Alliances are a thing, but it's like you can't get too comfortable or you can't get too like there's so many ways to like win but also to lose, but they're all like right, it's physical but it's also mental, but it's also yeah like personal, like there's so many different ways of strategy, and it doesn't follow like who's the nicest, because sometimes if someone's too nice they get voted off. So
Yeah,
it's like you have to just like be on your toes and like constantly aware while you're in this like enclosed, monitored environment.
totally. Yeah, like it's very much like you have this social thing, right? Where it feels very like Three of Cups, like we're all in it together, like cheers, right? And you're trying to almost like maintain that spirit of like play and like, yeah, it's just a game, right? But at the other end of it, it's like it's very cutthroat and you're like blindsiding people. And there's that element of like, well, you trust people, but then you can't trust them too much, which feels very much like the Scorpio, the Mars layer of this, right? And there is a lot of emotionality in this, like beyond just like the toll it takes on a physical body. You listen to like interviews with some of these people because that's how big of a Survivor fan I am that I have actually done that in my life. Is like they will talk about the fact that like it does mess them up for years, like that they like have to like recover from the experience of Survivor because of they do feel like those betrayals, while it was a game, like mess up their ability to trust people and stuff like that. So I do feel like there is kind of like this moon Mars thing that's happening underneath the surface where it's like it is a little bit more volatile, even long term than we might anticipate, even though it is quote unquote just a game.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, and that's it's just what happens when it's like you're stripped away from everything. Like in right, ostensibly paradise is like they go to like
Yeah,
Fiji and
Fiji.
foreign
Yeah,
island and then like
yeah.
are given like like very little food and like a tiny little bando. And yeah, that is like also like a thing of like when you're in close quarters with someone in like a high pressure environment, like you're probably gonna fall in love with someone. Like there's
Mm.
many cases, right, of
And he
people,
did.
right, and like literal like couples
Yeah,
from
he
the
did. Yeah, he
situation.
married like the girl he met on the show, like and proposed the night when it was just them two, I think, like down to the final two, and then he proposed. And so it was like, well, no matter what, they're
Well,
gonna win the million.
right, and I love that. I mean, it almost makes me think of the Hunger Games. Yeah, I don't know if that's a tangent I want to go, but if you know, you know. But I'm thinking too with Survivor, like it's not like this isn't just like a Mars Decan where like people are often criticized, not just because they don't win the right way or they don't have like an artful game, right? There's some like
Yeah.
Survivor that people are like kind of not into because they, it was maybe just an accident or it wasn't a result of their like deep mastery of strategy, which feels very
Yeah.
Mercury. Mars, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like Mercury being like the planet of bodybuilding. But yeah, go on.
No, no, I was loving where you were going with that. But yeah, I think that there's such an interesting thing there now in the way that Survivor has kind of progressed over the years. Is like there is this thing of like, oh, you weren't strategic enough, actually. Like you just kind of got brought along. So we're not voting for you. We're not giving you the million. And that feels like the mercurial component of this, where it's like strategy, mental acuity is part and parcel to the story of this Decan. And I do think it creates people who have sharper minds, sharper speech, like we were saying at the very beginning. And you see that through Kendrick, right? You see that through different, people that we've brought up different examples, but also, yeah, like the recognition in Survivor for that is kind of like a funny way that this also manifests. I'm wondering if like Survivor has like a placement, like the lot of spirit in Cancer too, or something.
Yeah, we should.
That would be so funny. But yeah, I feel like, is there anything else that you want to bring up with this Decan that you feel like we need to talk about before closing out this episode, or do you feel like we did it justice?
I think, yeah, maybe just in passing because I feel like it ties it up, like just mentioning the flower essence I
Oh,
made.
please do. Oh my God, I can't believe can't believe we almost forgot that. Please tell.
I'm on it. It is so I this is one of the only essences I made at night.
Okay.
Um, so I made it with my parents have like these beautiful like cultivated roses in their backyard. And so I like even it was like the peak of summer, obviously, because that's when the sun is in Cancer too. And I like offered like a peach and a bunch of strawberries to these like really ornate roses. And I just remember it just being like really just the protective enclosure because the my parents' roses are right near like the gate and you could see the moon and you could also see what's called the summer triangle, which is like a three stars that form a triangle in the sky. And so it just felt like this like extreme moment of magic that came that was just between me and the rose in
Mm.
the sky. And so it's one of my favorite essences. Like rose as an essence is like good for like virtually anything heart related. If you want to feel happier, if you want to feel more protective, if you need to grieve, like it just like strengthens and like brings succor to like any kind of emotional thing. So I just felt like rose was like really perfect for like the Cancer too, especially with the thorns of it all.
Oh, great point. But I love that it felt like a kind of like a almost like a sweet moment of like just you and them.
Yeah,
And like there is that kind of like look like enclosure or like I guess not an enclosure literally, but like feeling like that kind of intimacy can be
totally.
really sacred. And I think that that is maybe like a good way to think of this deck and beyond the kind of protective defensive side of it is like you are protecting and defending the sacredness of intimacy and connection and creation.
Yeah, yeah. It's if you don't have something worth protecting, what are the defenses for?
Yeah. Makes me think about how like moms can lift cars when their child's in danger and stuff like that. Like you can just have superhuman strength almost when you need to for the people that you love and the things that are near and dear to your heart. And I think that Cancer too has big kind of like mama bear energy and like protect the cubs and like I will mess you up, but it's because there's so much love here, and there is like I don't know. I just like I want to emphasize, I guess the one thing that I wanted to emphasize was because we talked so much about the Mars stuff, but there's just like there's so much love that lives here and like all of the Deccan images are like talking about love and joy and abundance and happiness and games and like there is that side of it too. And I think you have to hold both. And I think in some ways this Deccan almost feels like one of the more confusing ones because you're like Mercury, Mars in the middle of Cancer. Like, what are you doing there? Like, why and how do these guys fit together? Especially in this sign. And the fact that it is the only Mercury, Mars decan that we have, but it's here is like a really interesting thing to feel into, I think. And I hope that we illuminated it a little bit.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is I think people's confusion again comes down to something I'll say again, which is that we don't understand Mars. We think he's
Mm,
diurnal, but he actually wants to be in the woods with Moon and Venus protecting them. Like Mars at their most productive is protective and defensive. He's not poking people.
love
So
that.
yeah, I think the nurturing part is just like part and parcel of like this, nocturnal Mars, yeah, protecting that beautiful, imaginal, like lunar space. And then Mercury comes along and makes it weird.
You just made me want to do a whole episode with you on Mars. So, like,
Please.
let us know
Well.
if you guys want that episode, and we'll, I guess we'll start a planet series too.
Oh my God. Wait, like, yeah, I know you're not joking because I'm like so on board.
Should I start another series when I already have, like, I don't know, somewhat three going at the time that I can't do enough of? Maybe not, but if you guys want it,
No rush,
you let
exactly.
us know, and we're here to provide. But this was great. Thank you so much for coming on once again to talk about, the gorgeous decans of Cancer. We love them, and we love you guys for listening and for tuning in. And we hope you enjoyed. If you've been enjoying the show, please let us know. Leave a review, write a comment, like, subscribe. It really does help. It takes you literally 1 minute, but it means a lot to me. I see them all. I send the nice ones to Chloe. We, get really happy about them. They don't fall on deaf ears. So let us know if you're enjoying it and make sure to do all those things. And we will catch you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.